Hey guys, what's up? Today I'm super excited to share one of my newest Necromancer builds with you all. I call this build the Bloodstorm build. As you can see in the intro clip, this build combines the typical Bloodlands build and the new Season 1 unique Lidless Wall. The combination is such a fun experience where, as usual, you get to spam those Bloodlances endlessly, but at the same time, we're also being super tanky. This allows you to oftentimes just keep moving forward, killing everything in the way without needing to worry too much about dying. So really quick before we jump into the guide, I do want to mention that this build does require Lidless Wall, which is a unique item. And I imagine some of you might not have it yet. So if you really want this unique and you haven't heard about target farming, let me show you really quick. So first you want to go to this website here. And what you want to do is you want to filter on based on class. You pick Necromancer, and then it will list all the unique items for that class. Let's pick Lidless Wall here. Now, after you click this, the site will show you which type of enemy would have a better chance of dropping this item. In the case of Lidless Wall, seems like Skeleton and Knight. And then to the right side here, it also lists all the dungeon where you can find this type of enemy. So what you want to do is basically try farm those specific dungeons. So just disclaimer, I've never tested this myself, but it seems that many other content creator thinks that this works, so I would definitely give it a shot. So let's start off by talking about what's the premise of this build. So I'm gonna be honest here, when I first started this build, it was more of a meme. The unique shield dropped for me pretty early on, so I kinda just wanted to play around with it. But oh boy, this turns out way better than I thought. So the core of this build still revolves around Bloodlands. If you haven't watched my original Bloodlands build guide, I highly recommend that you do check that out first. I probably won't go into much detail about the basics of a Bloodlands build or blood builds in general. The Bloodlands variation here utilizes Gore Quill for pseudo AoE together with Potent Blood aspect as our primary essence generator. Now, obviously, the big difference in this build is a Lidless Wall. The Lidless Wall allows us to generate a lot of Bone Storms, and when combined with the aspect of Shielding Storm, it provides us with endless barrier generation. Remember, we trigger barrier generation for every single Bone Storm tick against each enemy. So, for example, with one Bone Storm hitting 5 enemies, we get 5 triggers per Bone Storm tick. Every time the Bone Storm damages one of those enemies, we get barrier generation. Now, with 5 Bone Storms, however, assuming each of those hits 5 enemies, we'll get 25 of those barrier generation triggers. This gives us just an insane amount of survivability. And there are rarely only 5 enemies. Imagine 10, 15, 20 enemies. That was just so many barrier generation procs. Now, one thing I discovered during testing is how well Lidless Wall work together with Gorequill. See, Lidless Wall will only spawn new Bone Storms when we trigger Lucky Hit against enemies that are not affected by existing Bone Storms. So, we'll typically need to somehow hit enemies to the sides and to the back a bit further away from us. Of course, we can manually aim for them, which we should also try do, but it can be hard to reach them in the chaos of things. So now one interesting thing is that these enemies that are further away are usually enemies that don't have a blood lance in them yet. And guess what Gorequill does? Gorequill spawn blood lances that prioritize enemies that don't have a lance in them yet. Yep, it's usually targeting those enemies that are to the side and further in the back away from us. So these are the same enemies that are usually also not within a Bone Storm yet. Oh, if you're still following me, this basically means the Blood Orbs spawn Blood Lances, which will spawn Bone Storms for us. And this synergy is just wonderful. And finally, we have Aspect of Osseous Gale. I still don't know how to say this word. Osseous? I'll look it up. Anyway, so Osseous Gale not only extends our Bone Storm durations in this build, but it also allows us to consume tons amount of corpses pretty much instantaneously. So while this makes Corpse Tendril a little bit harder to use, we do generate ton of additional blood orbs by using the Embalmer aspect, or aspect of Embalmer. For each corpse, we have a 30% chance to generate a blood orb. And blood orbs will keep our farming engine going. So this build definitely works better with big pack of mobs, and the recent change in density in dungeons definitely helps this a lot. So a lot of time I was able to just spam Bloodlance and Decrepify while moving forward through the dungeon, not even needing to cast Corpse Tendril. Now, why would we want to play this build over any other blood builds in general? So first and foremost, I would just say having multiple Bone Storms swirling around is just super cool and very satisfying to see. Second, it obviously gives us more survivability compared to other Bloodlands builds. And while it's not perfect, there are a lot of situations where I thought I would just die. I was surrounded by like multiple elites and a lot of other stuff, but somehow my health is just completely untouched. And finally, in some way, if played correctly, I think this build can actually go through dungeons really, really fast. The reason is that a lot of times we don't even need to cast Corpse Tendril, which, while powerful, as you probably know, it does add slight delays to clearing packs because, there's that delay between casting Corpse Tendril and when the pixel pulling starts. So yeah, this build definitely has potential to be a lot faster. Now, why might you not want to play this build? So this build has several downsides, of course. I think especially lower density areas can sometimes really stop our momentum, usually because we don't generate enough essence. So at times we have to spend a bit of time spamming Hemorrhage to get back to full essence. Secondly, using Osseous Gale, as we mentioned, can make casting Corpse Tendril really, really hard because our Bone Storm just insta-consumes all nearby corpses. I think you can definitely get better at getting around this. It's still tricky, but I think it's still very annoying for those times when you really need to use Corpse Tendril to like CC or get an insta-burst of a lot of blood orbs. And finally, Another downside to this is that to enable this build, we do lose a few offensive aspect slots that could have boosted our overpower damage. A major one here is that we're dropping sacrificial aspects, and I suspect as we get to maybe Nightmare Dungeon level 80, tier 80 or 90, our damage could fall a bit short and will make clearing packs a bit harder, and maybe it takes longer. So let's move on to gears and aspects. I might skip certain things, but don't worry, I'll make sure to include a link to the build. So, first, gear affixes. Most of the gear affixes are the same as your standard Bloodlands build. Max life, which now also translates to max barrier, overpower damage, essence, regeneration, and so on. We do also want some amount of cooldown reduction so that Bone Storm will be up sooner if our chain of Bone Storms gets interrupted for whatever reason. And also, I'm kinda somewhat sure that there's a bug that prevents more Bone Storms from being created despite there being an active one. I will need to do some testing to figure out exactly what's going on and in what situation this can happen. But I'm sure during some of my dungeon runs, I see this happen multiple times. But anyway, moving on to the aspects. So let's first look at the defining gear of this build, the Lidless Wall over here. So first, the affixes of this shield, which I think is actually a really big appeal of this shield. It's almost actually just perfect for Bloodlands builds. One of the best thing, which unfortunately I got a lower roll on this, is attack speed. Attack speed is easily one of the best stats for us, and one that is actually really hard to get more of. You cannot get attack speed on regular offhand or shield, so having this here is actually super nice. Unfortunately, damage to distant enemies doesn't really do anything for us, but that's okay. Also, missing, we don't have max life here, which is very unfortunate, but instead we get Lucky Hit, chance to restore primary resources, which is super crucial. We always want this. And the maximum essence is also nice, because we typically generate essence really fast and really at a really high amount as well. So having that maximum essence actually allow us to regenerate more essence over long period of time, because if we have a lower maximum essence, we pretty much ended up wasting a lot of essence at times. Now, about the unique effect, let's go read it really quick. It says, Lucky Hit, while you have an active Bone Storm, hitting an unaffected enemy has a 25% chance to spawn an additional storm at their location. Each of your active sacrifice bonuses increases the chance by 25% and the total additional Bone Storms you can have by 1. So first of all, this is a Lucky Hit effect, and luckily though, see what I did there? This is not a problem for us. Our Bloodlances, both the ones that we cast and also the ones that are spawned by Gorequill, hit so many enemies. We always get a lot of Lucky Hit procs. And also, I'm again very lucky to get one of these with a max roll. See the 5 to 25%? I get a 25% chance one. And with all minions sacrifice, this is pretty much 100%. So every time the Lucky Hit procs, I am guaranteed to have an additional storm being spawned. I actually think though that a slightly lower than max roll, say I don't know 20% or something, would be totally okay. Or in certain cases, it might even be ideal, because what it does, it gives our Bone Storms the chance to spread out more time-wise, because I think there could be occasions when you just have all 5 Bone Storms pretty much spawn at the exact same time, which means they all will expire at about the same time, which makes you unable to chain them further. And yeah, since we sacrifice all of our minions, we can get up to 4 additional Bone Storms, which means total of 5 Bone Storms, which is really, really neat. So let's see. Next we have Gore Quills over here. And this is pretty much the core of our Bloodlands build. As I mentioned earlier in the video, this also synergizes very nicely with Lidless Wall because it helps us hit enemies further away so we can spawn more Bone Storms. Remember, new Bone Storms are only created if we hit enemies that are not already hit within a Bone Storm. Next we have Aspect of Shielding Storm. Not much to say here. I think this one's pretty obvious. The one thing that I recently learned is that with the recent hotfix, probably a few days ago, August 11 or something, Barrier can now reach max life amount, where previously it never gets to max life amount, I believe. And I don't think they mentioned this explicitly, but this was it probably comes together with the hotfix they did for Temerity. But maybe, yeah, they ended up fixing it for everything. So yeah, I didn't know about this before. I always thought it can get to maximum life with Shielding Storm, but either way, it's great for us. And let's see, I have almost 15,000 HP on my health on my Necro, so that's a lot of barrier to work with. Now, a couple other aspects that really puts this build together. First, we have Osseous Scale. I mentioned this earlier again. So this not only extends our Bone Storm duration, but it's very important because it allows our Bone Storm to consume large quantities of corpses very, very fast. And why do we want to do this? Well, that's because of our next aspect. It's the aspect of Embalmer. This one gives us a 30% chance to spawn a blood orb every time we consume a corpse. So see what's going on here? This one will consume a lot of corpses, and this one will spawn blood orbs when we consume a corpse. So this allows us to potentially add a lot of additional blood orbs. And this is crucial, since we are missing some easy blood orb generator tools such as Blood Wave, and also Osseous Gale kind of makes it harder for us to use Corpse Tendril, so we do need a different way to generate blood orbs, and these together works really well, especially when there's like tons of enemies around. So a few more tweaks that we want to do to this build that differs from a regular blood build, I would say, is let's first take a look at our skill tree. One thing you really want to consider is taking 3 points in Grim Harvest. Consuming a corpse generates 6 essence, and that is mainly because we are using Osseous Gale again, which eats a lot of corpses, which allows Embalmer to generate blood orbs, which with Potent Blood gives us essence. But in addition, just consuming a corpse by itself with Grim Harvest now generates essence. If there are 10 corpses underground, 60 essence, just like that. And yeah, this really smoothen out, like making sure that we have enough essence to keep pushing in the dungeon. Next is our Paragon board. I don't think there's a whole lot of difference in the Paragon board. Most of the things are pretty much the same as your regular Bloodlands build. If there's anything that you might want to change is when you have remaining points that you have, I would probably prioritize getting max health here and there whenever you can reach them. And there's actually quite a few here and there. And why we want to do that, again, because max health now doesn't just mean more health and overpower damage, it also means more maximum barrier. So we definitely want to get as much as possible. So for me here, what I did is just in the starter board here, I made sure to grab these nodes here to give me additional maximum life, assuming you went this route here. So you can also take maximum life on the other path. And then on the bone graph board, there's some really nice nodes over here that gives you not just maximum life, there's some armor as well, which might be really nice. So you might want to take these. This one is the Blood Orb board. And where are those? I think they're over here. Yeah, there's some over here. Gives you maximum life and Blood Orb healing. We do want that. I do think Blood Orb healing has a very non-significant impact, but still nice to have. But definitely grab maximum life. Here on the Bloodbath board, we have some nodes, I think, down here that gives us maximum life. Yeah, I think each of the clusters with max life gives us a total of 8%, which is pretty decent, I think. And finally up here, Scent of Death, there's a little bit more maximum life over here next to the legendary node, so that's an easy pickup. Yeah, so I think that's probably that's all I would change with this build. Otherwise, it's, again, pretty much the same as a regular Bloodlands build. So finally, you might ask, what about the awesome Malignant Hearts introduced in Season 1? Unfortunately, I tried this build on the Eternal server, but honestly, I don't really think there's too much of a game changer that we get from the hearts for this build. One thing, of course, is the Barber. Everyone uses Barber, and it has been proven, I think, to be a great damage multiplier. So definitely give that a try. I think it might work with aspect of shielding storm now. Like, it should generate barrier. I am not sure, so make sure to test that. But yeah, I'm honestly myself not a big fan of Barber. Yes, it's strong, but somehow it doesn't feel good. It's weird, like when you have all of these cool attack of yours not dealing the damage, but instead they just get aggregated into like sort of this boring one thing. I don't know, that's just me. Anyway, next let's talk about the Sacrilegious Heart. This could actually be good with our build. So since this heart will try cast Corpse Tendril automatically, our only corpse skill, perhaps it can race against the Osseous Scale aspect trying to consume all corpse. That way, it releases us from the duty of needing to spam Corpse Tendril forcefully to hopefully find an available corpse in the middle of all this chaos. So yeah, and you know, while we're on this topic, like, what the heck is wrong with corpse visuals remaining on the screen even after being consumed? And I think this is specific to Osseous Gale, perhaps. Like, this has been so annoying. Like, there's all these phantom corpses that you don't know has been consumed or not, and then, like, you try Corpse Tendril on it, and nothing happens. It's just weird. They really should fix it. And one heart that I'm actually really curious about trying is the Revenge Heart. This is sort of the opposite spectrum of Barber. It suppresses incoming damage, and then when you use a certain type of skill, all that suppressed damage is amplified, and then it deals a big fire AoE to nearby enemies. And yeah, I think it's gonna be a bit risky, but I think it would be so interesting because now we can absorb so much damage. We can just oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes stand in the middle of a pack of enemies and just like absorb all the damage. And then once we go in there, absorb the billion damage, and then we pop Blood Mist, which is a Macabre skill, and that will release the damage. I wonder how much damage we can do. This definitely sounds reckless, but also super fun. So there you have it. That is the Bloodstorm build. I've been really enjoying playing this build, and I feel quite unstoppable just rolling through dungeons with all this barrier generation. And especially with the new density, it just feels so good. Though I do have to say, you can easily get a bit cocky when playing this build and get reckless, and didn't realize at times that all your bone storms are gone and expired, and you just rush to the enemy and pop, you're dead. But yeah, I'm quite surprised by the unexpected synergies it has with Bloodless builds, and I really had a great time too putting this together. At the moment, my Blood Necromancer is level 89, running tier 78 at the highest. I will try get closer to 100 and see how far I can push with this. I really hope you get to try this build, or at least get inspired to try something of your own. So do let me know what you think in the comments. And it probably goes without saying, but please consider leaving a like and subscribing to this channel if you find this useful in any way at all. It really encourages me to make more videos like this. And with that, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.